Welcome to Trauma Speaks, brought to you by Third Soul, a place where we dismantle trauma and feed your soul. My name is Jamina, and I'll be your host for this channel. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, as this channel means so much to me. Trauma is one of those things that a lot of people sit with but don't know how to deal with, especially during this quarantine. On this channel, it is a safe space for people to come and tell their stories. Even though a lot of people may be scared, it is a safe space. I will be sharing stories along this channel, and feel free to email traumaspeaks@thirdsoul.com to go ahead and email your submissions, and I'll go ahead and read off your stories. I will be sharing a story a little later, but I also have a panel that is on board, and they are ready to talk about trauma, so go ahead and tune in for that. Does it say recording on your side?
It does.
Yeah. I just want to thank you so much for tuning in with me and being here. I love you guys so much, and thank you for being on this panel.
Of course.
You guys will be on it forever. So, also, thank you for the YouTube people that are out there and watching this, or just the people in general who are watching this. And let me go ahead and dive in. So we're going to talk about trauma and the things that affect us. So let me go into the first question. How do you define trauma? Anyone can go first.
Okay. For me, defining trauma, when I think of trauma, I think of a deep pain. I think of a situation or something that has happened that affects you internally. And it's not something that just goes away overnight, or, something you just think about here and there. Like, it stays on your mind. It's, it stays with you in everything you do. And I just think, for me, like, trauma, when I think of the word, as soon as I think of the word, I think of deep pain, and it's unexplainable. It's something that you carry on with you, I feel like, for the rest of your life. So that's my take.
I would say, when I think of trauma, in defining trauma, I would say it's either an event or a series of events that we internalize because we don't know how to deal with it. That cuts us so deep that we're just unaware with how to deal with it. And it has the capacity, because we don't know how to deal with it, it has the capacity to affect us in our day-to-day, whether we realize it or not. And I think that through awareness and just understanding your own story, you can overcome your trauma. You just have to deal with it. And because it's such deep pain, like you mentioned, like, you can't get over that hump any other way but to go through it.
Right.
Like, to actually deal with the feelings that arise from whatever situation. And so that's how I would define trauma.
I love both of your answers, because trauma definitely is something that is a series of events that it's either from the past or the present or is going on right now, right? So, and a lot of times we don't know how to deal with it. We think that trauma is something so small, and actually it's huge. And I think it's important for us to deal with these emotions. I do want to ask, do you believe that trauma can go away?
Oh my gosh, y'all.
Like, that's hard. That's a hard question for me. I feel like my trauma hasn't went away. I'm able to get through it, like Shani said, get through it through the day and, cope with it. And even though I guess sharing it with others has made me feel a little bit better about it. But at the same time, it's like, it's always that uneasy feeling of that memory coming back, you know. And I think I honestly I can't tell you like if I feel like it's something that goes away, because I'm not sure because of my own trauma. Like I know that it's still been there, and that something that affected me when I was younger. So it's like, to say it would go away, I mean, anybody would hope so, you know, but the reality of it is that me personally, I'm unsure, like, you know, but I'm sure there's ways to heal yourself. And I don't know, you know, and it may be short term, it may be long term, but I know there's definitely ways to heal yourself. And, but I just feel like it's just kind of like how, you know, they say you forgive, but you never forget. And I think that's the way I see it, you know, like, even though I've forgiven, even though I've, you know, dealt with it, it's like, it's still like, I'm never going to forget it, you know? So.
You know, that's interesting because I feel like you brought up a good point. I think that an important factor to consider when we're talking about trauma is to understand when that trauma occurred. Because if it occurred in our formative years, in our adolescence, it's formative to how we see the world. Yeah. And I think that it's harder to let go of your trauma when it's happened so young, because that's your perspective on how you move, and that's just how you learn. In fact, sometimes it even becomes like your norm, so you're not sure of anything else. I don't know if it's me being optimistic, but I think that you can. The question is, can you get over your trauma, right?
Can trauma go away?
Wait, say that again?
Can trauma go away?
Can your trauma go away? I think that you can definitely heal yourself, and it doesn't have to have a hold on you. I'm not sure that it can, like, that you can fully forget about it, but I do think that you can heal yourself, because I think sometimes things happen and we're ashamed to speak on it, and the less we acknowledge it, the more of a hold it has on us. And so I feel like I'm really going to have to think about that, because initially I was thinking, I think that you can get over your traumas, but even with saying that, it still creates your world and how you see the world. So if something happened when you were 5 or 6, it's still, to some degree, even if you learn to rewrite or recreate a new understanding for yourself, that was kind of your starting point in how you interacted with the world. So.
And I also think too, like, yeah, you have a really good point, because I also feel like too, I mean, and it may be something that you can heal from, but like you said, like, and it can go to generations, to where, like, you know, what you've dealt with, you don't want it to happen to your children. So you move differently, or you react differently to certain things based off of what you've been through, or based off of that trauma, you know? So it's hard to be like, oh, you know, it goes away, because and that's with me. Like, I just still feel like it's, you know, it's that uncertainty, because it's like, I just feel like one way or another, even if you heal from it, you're still going to have that in your head. So it's always going to affect some part of your life. You know what I mean? Like, and rather that's like, you're a little bit more, you know, protective of your children, or you're a little bit more protective of your siblings. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well, that's perfect, because that goes into the next question. Do you believe generational trauma exists? And if so, why? Like, how does it represent itself?
I definitely think generational trauma exists for sure. Um, and I think one of the hardest things for most people, I know me, um, I know even, my mom and aunties, and things like that. I know growing up in their time, like for us, I feel like we have a little bit more outlets than they did. And growing up in their time, it's like they didn't really have anybody that they can go to. Like, if something happened, it was kind of like deal with it. Like, and even like, back in the days, like my grandmother and my grandfather, when it comes to like marriage and, your parents, like no matter what you go through, you stay with your husband, you stay with your wife, no matter if they cheat on you, no matter if they beat you, whatever the case is. And I feel like they didn't have that outlet. So it was kind of like they just had to cope with it for the time being. However, unaware that it affected them and would affect their children later on. And I think it just stems from too not having parents that understood either. Because the further you go back in history, our grandparents, they really didn't have anything. They just had to go day to day, work day to day. Like, what outlet did they have? Who did they have to talk to? They didn't. So it's kind of like it's a consistent, a reoccurring situation to where they kind of had to be silent, and our parents and their children had to be silent about how they felt or what they've been through, and then our parents had the same thing. And then when it comes to us, I do feel like our parents were a little bit more trying, as in like, trying to learn how to learn situations and ways to handle their own, and give us a better, like, I guess, like a better future, or not pass that on to us. I do feel like our parents' generation was a little bit more trying than theirs, but I do still feel like, I mean, it's generational because think about, okay, well, maybe I do need to, tell my mom or tell my dad how I feel, or whatever the case is, and I think, I mean, the situation itself is just, it's hard. So
Think about generational trauma. I think about way back when the black women were getting raped by the white men and they were left alone, while the men were working. Can you guys?
yeah, it's a little low, but yeah, we can hear you.
Where the men were working and they were getting hung, or they were getting lynched, and while the black woman was left alone. And I think the generational trauma of her being by herself has passed on and passed on and passed on. So we see a representation of that generational trauma where black women are left alone in a lot of marriages. Black women are least to get married. So I think that's also another form of generational trauma, because that's way back, right? I mean, not that long ago, but it's from centuries on centuries. When you look at reflection on your parents or your grandparents, how long did it take for them to get married?
Right.
They might be married, but how long did it take them to get married? And they don't know how to let themselves love because of that generational trauma of being alone all the time. And I think that's a huge representation of it. So I'm going to dive deep into the last question. Are you a failure if you don't let go of trauma? Oh, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I just wanted to add to the last question that I even see it represented in like how the older generation of women interact with the younger generation. And I don't know how to articulate this, but my family is comprised of mostly women, at least on my maternal side. And sometimes it seems like when I hear the stories of like my great grandmother and dealings with her mom and her aunts, it seemed like a very sabotaging type of exchange that women had with one another. And I see it in my generation as well, but I don't know if it's as blatant as they had to deal with it. But it's so alarming when I think of like all the things that other women have done to other women in our own bloodline. Like these aren't even outsiders. And it's not even to say that those things are appropriate. Like it's appropriate to mistreat outsiders, but I would hope and I believe that you treat your kin with more love than you would anyone else. But I just wanted to add that 2 cents in because I feel like that's another way that generational trauma affects us, for sure.
Sure. And it really does start within the family. It's normally not outsiders that,
Yeah.
it normally starts in the family, and that's the saddest part because it's like, when you think of family, you think of blood, you think of like the people you can go to no matter what. And 9 times out of 10, it's not like that, and it's really sad, but that's the way things typically are.
Yeah.
We do have about 2 minutes, as you see pop up. Are you a failure if you don't let go of trauma?
I don't think you're a failure at all. I don't think no, you're not a failure. I think trauma is one of the hardest things to get through. Just as any, you know, I guess what I was going to say, guess any, just like any like mental, I guess what I'm trying to say is like any anxiety, stress, all of that you have to deal with. I think trauma it's hard. So I definitely don't think you are a failure if you can't get over it. I think it's just, something you have to learn. You have to find ways to heal yourself. And if that means, talking or writing down in a notebook or, you know, expressing your anger or your feelings in a certain way, whatever the case is, it's just like, you have to just find ways to heal yourself and find ways that work for you. But I don't feel like nobody that has ever been through any trauma is a failure at all. If anything, you won. If anything, you came out on the winning side because no matter what, you still conquered. You still got through it. You know what I mean? Whether you still deal with it on a day-to-day basis, you still got through that situation, that particular incident. Because some people aren't strong enough to do that. Some people in their lives, because of trauma that they go through. So I don't think anybody who has ever been in trauma is a failure because you can't let go of it or whatever the case is. Like, to me, in my eyes, anybody who has gone through anything, you're actually, you're strong. You're a soldier.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. I think, and it's important for us to watch the language that we use with ourselves because, yeah, I definitely don't believe that we're failures. Like you said, we survived those situations regardless of the coping mechanism that we chose, whether we were kids or not. That's what was necessary for us to get through it and get to the other side. And although I definitely don't think that you're a failure, I think that depending on the trauma and how you internalize it and deal with it, you can harbor a lot of anger or resentment, and those things can turn into blockages for you. Not even with maybe the person that caused this trauma, but just how you move within your world. And I do think that depending on the level of trauma, you can kind of hinder your own growth. And sometimes you may not, if you never deal with your trauma, you may never get to the most optimal version of yourself. And so that's something to consider. Certain things that have happened in my life personally, I found myself just being upset, just going through life, just being upset. And I realized like this anger that I have is not helping me in any way. And so that was something that I'm learning to deal with. So yeah, like I can't have those loving relationships and interact with people, genuine people that I want to interact with, if I'm exuding just frustration and pain, you know? So I definitely don't believe that you're a failure. But I do think that it is important to deal with it so you can get to the other side, you know, so that you can be the best version of yourself, because ultimately that's what the hope is, you know. But yeah.
And just to add on one little thing, because I do know some people feel like coping with it is drinking or smoking and or other things, other drugs and things like that's their way of coping with it. But those type of things only heal you for the second, for the minute, for the hour, you know? And just like Shani said, you have to find a way, to, what were you saying, to pretty much deal with it and like address it. Because if you don't, like, you know, those things it's not gonna heal the pain. It's not, you know. And some people feel like, well, that's the way I cope with things, but it's not gonna heal you ever, you know. And I just wanted to throw that out too. So, you know,
in certain situations, I've found myself just shutting down. And I've learned that although that's how I chose to cope with certain things when I was younger, it doesn't serve me as an adult to just emotionally shut down and withdraw. Because I can't connect with people. Then I can't grow for myself. I can't grow out of this space. And so absolutely. Sometimes how we chose to cope in the past, we have to learn new ways to evolve ourselels, for sure. Wow. This was so awesome. I'm sorry. You can edit that out because I don't read out the vision.
Oh no, I'm gonna keep that in there. I'll keep this in there. But I think that we use the negative stuff that has happened in our life for fuel for our future. Because if we let that hinder us, we're gonna stay in a negative place. But if we use it for positivity and to go forward, it's only gonna serve us in a better place. And I just want to thank you both for sharing. Like, wow, like it really was amazing. Like listening to you guys speak. It was very empowering, and I hope that it's empowering you just talking about it and like actually taking a dive into what trauma can look like for both of you guys. So thank you.
yeah, of course. I mean, this is definitely like an outlet. This is definitely, you know, you normally aren't asked those type of questions, or enough people aren't asked those type of questions, and so enough people aren't able to express how they feel about those certain cases or situations. And I definitely appreciate you having me here, and Shanice, and like, you know, being able to talk about it. And I just really hope that, you know, what we say also helps other people, because like we all said, trauma is hard, you know. So just to know that there's people like ourselves and other people out there that has dealt with it, or, you know, has gone through certain things, just to be here and, you know, let them know, to acknowledge that they're not alone, you know, and neither are we. So
thank you so much. Well, thank you for
Please like, comment, and subscribe. All right. Bye.